Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Lilian Cespedes Gonzalez bringing you once again another virtual tour of a lovely place that you probably don't know about. And today we're in the beautiful area of Baeza in the province of Jaen in Andalucia, the south of Spain, very famous for its sea of olive trees, very famous for its history and for its architectures. And this is a UNESCO heritage site. Well, I would like to give you a brief tour of about half an hour of the city center. I recorded all of this in October 2025, and my apologies because my voice is not doing so well. We are already with allergies, but hey, here we are. So let me introduce you to the very wonderful city, although I guess in many terms we would nowadays consider it a village actually, since Baeza itself only has a population of about 15,000 inhabitants. Baeza has been a key location, like I said, in Spain, particularly during the period of the Reconquista, and a lot of the heritage that I'm going to be showing you today is related to either the Middle Ages or the early modern period. Well, the area that we're walking by is let's say, what used to be the outskirts of the city, just following the trail of the city walls and of what used to lead to the Alcázar. The Alcázar of Baeza, which was essentially a fortified palace or castle, whichever word you want to use, because either of them is interchangeable in this case, unfortunately did not survive the many, many wars that have happened in this area. But they are actually doing some excavations at the top of the hill of Baeza to actually try and find part of that fortified area. It's also an area that has some very incredible views, and there is some short clips actually in our YouTube channel where you can appreciate that. Well, we're walking towards the actual historical center. I'm actually walking from the area where I was staying in a wonderful, holiday home. But in any case, let me give you a little bit of the history of the city and why is this important. Well, you see, like I said, Baeza really comes to preeminence during the Middle Ages, even though there has been human habitation here since prehistory, and particularly in antiquity, it was a very important location. This is the little touristic train. You'll see it in better motion in a few minutes later. The period of, I guess, biggest supremacy in Baeza is what many of these poems and statues are symbolizing, which is the period of the Taifa of Baeza. This is a very small Muslim kingdom that appears in the 13th century for barely a couple of years, ruled by Emir al-Bayasi, the one from Baeza. Well, this man was a noble Almohad, which is going to be coming in conflict with the ruling dynasty. And as a result, he turns to the man that you are seeing here in this statue, who is the famous Castilian king, Fernando III el Santo. He will become a vassal of Fernando. And eventually al-Bayasi will be executed by the Almohads, which will lead to much of the Muslim population in the area fleeing farther south. Fernando, king of Castilla, since 1217, up until 1252, will also eventually become king of Leon, reuniting two of the most important Christian kingdoms in Spain, and will be known for his huge advances of the Reconquista, of the reconquest of the area of Al-Andalus, those Muslim kingdoms that became to rule most of what was actually Spain and Iberia from the year 711 until the end of the Middle Ages. Well, Fernando was actually a very important king for Spain. He will actually become canonized in the 17th century, which is a big deal. He's going to be a king that during his time period will actually create a lot of culture. He will be very good for religious institutions in the country, literature, intellectual developments, that kind of stuff. Even his children, of which he has like 13 or something like that, including the future Alfonso X el Sabio, Alphonse the X, the Wise, will become some of the most powerful people, not just in Spain, but in Europe at that moment in time, since he's also going to be father to some very important women that will be pulling the dynamic, let's say, power politics of both religious and grand nobility elements in Spain for a fair few years, and even internationally, since a few of the women of the family will go to establish very important relationships with the kingdoms of England and France. Okay, well, we are now entering actually part of the most famous area that is within the UNESCO listing of Baeza. We are here in what we call Plaza del Pópulo, also known as Plaza de los Leones, because of the fountain that you will see in the middle that represents some lions, and I'll give you a better, look just in here. This is an area in the north of the fortified city. We've just come through it, through the Puerta de Jaen, that's the door of Jaen, which used to be part of the fortifications of the city. However, the direct continuation of the Puerta is actually el Arco de Villalar, which actually comes a little bit later. This was actually created in the 16th century due to a visit that the city had by King Carlos I, by Charles I. Of the two buildings that we have in here, a couple of things. We have the one next to the fountain is what it's called La Casa del Pópulo, or Audiencia Civil, or Escribanías Públicas, has many names. It is, in any case, a building of great historical importance. It was actually done at the beginning of the 16th century, and it is unfortunately been deteriorated as the years have gone by. It's needed some restoration in the 20th century, but it's a very beautiful building that is very characteristic of something you're going to be seeing in Jaén everywhere, which is what we call el estilo plateresco. I will actually tell you a bit more about Estilo Plateresco when we're in some other areas of the city, but, linking with that name. Then on the other side, the building that is now, I believe, the building for the tourism office, in this particular case, is La Antigua Carnicería, the old butcher shop from the 16th century, which wasn't here originally until the 20s. It was actually transplanted from its original, location, and between that and the other building, this is part of the area of the city where the Palace of Justice and where tribunals are held in the city nowadays. I forgot to mention, and I will do so very, very quickly, about the fountain, La Fuente de los Leones, the Fountain of the Lions, because of the little lions that perhaps you already noticed on it, is actually quite a remarkable place, because it relates to the even older history of the area. We're pretty confident that the water that comes here actually relates to an archaeological monument in the area of Castulo, which is just on the outside of Baeza, which was actually an Ibero-Roman city. And we wonder if maybe the reason why there is a movement from Castulo over to Baeza is due to administrative and political changes in the local area of Jaén. But there is actually, just so you guys know, a lot of ancient history over in not just Castulo, but the area of Jaén. There is a lot of archaeological evidence that are coming from here and that are really going to change our understanding of Iberian and ancient Spain in the years to come. Well, we've been walking by the way, an area that is currently under construction. They're doing huge renovations here in the area of La Plaza de la Constitución, the Square of the Constitution. And we've been walking through the Paseo de los Portales Mercaderes, which is an area where I'm sure you've noticed a lot of bars, things like that, shops, which is very cool. So don't let the, construction issues put you off. There is a wonderful coffee shop in the corner, La Biblioteca 96, 100% recommend. Had my breakfast there every day. It was wonderful. We will be coming back through this area in a few moments, so I'll tell you more about the tower on our way back. But we are now going towards an area that I feel a lot of people miss in Baeza. So you're looking just now to the church La Iglesia de la Purísima Concepción. It has this beautiful mural here, which, as you can see, is a bit more modern, from 1988, because, unfortunately, the more recent history of Baeza has caused some damage to the city, and, I'll explain a bit more where that originates from. But this is a Catholic church, of course. Baeza, despite being a very small town or city, I guess for many of us we will consider it a village, has a very, very, very high number of churches because, of course, during the medieval period and Renaissance, this was actually the original capital of the province. Jaen will not take that pleasure until many years later. We will come back through this square again in a few moments. Unfortunately, we need to do a little bit of back and forth, but we will come back to this area so that I can talk to you a bit more about a very important family and the building of the town hall, which is incredibly beautiful, and where I'll explain a bit more of this plateresco style. But this area of the Iglesia de la Concepción links in with this building right next to it, which is El Mercado de Abastos, the original market of Baeza. And this figure that you see here is the figure of El Corregidor in Spain was essentially a civil servant of the king, and they had different offices, but normally they were in charge of, let's say, legal matters, jurisdiction, and admin of the city. And that's why, well, you're going to see the importance that this figure has in Baeza, specifically in relation to the town hall and a very specific family that really brings that position to a whole new stature. Okay, we're moving now into the area of La Plaza de San Francisco Square, which is now home to El Auditorio / Convento de San Francisco. This is currently an auditorium, a place for, let's say, audiovisual performances. Originally, it was the convent of San Francisco, which was one of the most important pieces of Renaissance in Andalucia, which unfortunately will not actually get to us in its full shape. The actual earthquake of Lisbon in 1775, actually was felt all the way in Jaen, in the south of Spain, and that actually damaged several buildings of the city, including this one. More importantly, Baeza is an area that after, let's say, the early modern period really goes down the hill, particularly during the late 18th, early 19th century. In the 19th century, Spain will go through the Napoleonic invasions, what we call the Spanish Peninsula War in English, but in Spain we call it the War of Spanish Independence, because, well, our power was actually usurped, and it will be very severely damaged and ransacked by the French. So between one thing and another, and of course the pass of time, well, we've not been able to to actually, see it in full. It's actually a monument that was developed by the famous Renaissance architect of Spain, Andrés de Vandelvira, who actually was trying to create a very important funerary chapel, which in the city of Baeza is actually known as La Capilla de los Benavides, within the convent of los Franciscanos, of the Franciscans. Los Benavides were one of the most important families in Baeza. They pretty much ran the whole show. So you can see that this was supposed to be a very opulent place. Part of the area that has, the best state of conservation is actually inside, and we cannot see it from here. But, well, I hope that you get at least an idea of how important this place was and the type of, nobility that it was trying to represent. Okay, so we've doubled back to us, to the corner where we were earlier, in the Pasaje del Cardenal Benavides. So notice the same name again. This is a very important street for a couple of reasons. We have the current Ayuntamiento de Baeza, the Town Hall of Baeza, which used to be El Palacio del Corregidor y la Cárcel, the prison, which was commissioned by Charles I of Spain, and the Palace of El Corregidor, and in front of it, in the houses that you see right across, which are a lot more modest, was actually one of the homes of Antonio Machado, who actually used to live in this city because he was a teacher here for quite some time. Well, this is an incredible building, and it's a really great example of what we call this plateresco, right? So, plateresco is a type of architecture that only exists in Spain, and I dare to say it's not even a full Spanish architectural style. It's an architectural style that flourishes in the 15th to early 16th century, specifically in the Kingdom of Castile, and that will reach its height during the time of Carlos I, of Charles I. It's a weird combination of early Renaissance Renaissance, late Gothic, the style that Spanish people call mudéjar, but that is essentially Islamic art. It's very beautiful, it's very convoluted, and it gets its name, plateresco, from the work of the plateros. A platero is somebody that works with silver, a silversmith. These are very, very convoluted works. They require a lot of detail, and I think it's very obvious why the house is so important. And what's the deal with this Benavides family? Well, La Casa de Benavides, the house of Benavides, a noble family originally from the central plains of Spain, from El Reino de León, will gain a lot of power during the time of Alfonso VII, but as the Middle Ages go by, they will expand their, let's say, fortunes. So in the area of León, they were very powerful around Astorga, for example, but eventually, because of the Reconquista and political alliances, they linked themselves to the area of Jaen, becoming Captain General of the Kingdom of Jaen, Alcaide, which is essentially, the lord or the, let's say, protector, so to speak, and related indeed with archbishops of Toledo, cardinals, etc., etc. These people, like I said, really run the show, and they're going to have some of the most important property and areas in not just Baeza, but the general geographical location. Okay, so I'm bouncing back again towards the core city center, or the historical city center. We're bypassing one of the towers from, once again, the late Middle Ages over to the, let's say, early modern period. This is La Calle de las Barbacanas, as the name suggests, similar to the idea of a barbican, right? In English, you can understand what the purpose of that tower was. Well, through this area, we encounter mostly, let's say, it's an area of transit. There is a lot of bars and residences and whatnot, but there are still, elements of the legacy of the city. However, I'm going to take this opportunity to bring you up to speed in the overall history of Baeza until we get to some of the most iconic buildings. So during the early modern period, let's say 16th, 17th century, Baeza will actually go up in power quite a lot because of industry, agriculture, and commerce. Like I said, Baeza is an area that is blessed by a lot of good land. It's amongst the most fertile areas in the whole of Spain and considered some of the most fertile areas in all of Europe. This is an area that benefits from grain, wine country, lots of olives. In fact, the Sea of Olive trees is here between Baeza and Úbeda, and we will be talking about Úbeda in another one of our tours coming up shortly. There will be textile industry as well in here, etc., etc. However, from the reign of Philip II onwards, which is, the tail end of the 16th century, early stages of the, tail end of the 16th century and early stages of the 17th century, things will really start going down the hill. Like I said, the earthquake of Lisbon is going to cause damage to the city. The political developments by the minor Austrias of Spain will really take centralization to whole new levels. Places far away from Madrid like Baeza didn't matter to them, okay? As much as it had been a good spot for the Reconquista, well, Baeza is, out country. The farther that we go into history, the more wars that are going to be fought in Spain, and since this is agricultural land, it will be terribly damaged. So, as a result, particularly by the time of the Peninsular War, and considering that the city of Bailén is not far away from Baeza, and in fact was one of the enclaves for one of the most important battles, things will really be terrible around here. War, famine, bad harvest, and the final kick was the end of the university, because Baeza had a university. We're actually approaching the building just now. So as a result, things will be pretty bad. Add to that the Spanish Civil War and Franco, and generally is serious. In fact, the INE, the National Institute of Statistics in Spain, shows that the population of Baeza has barely changed between the year 1842 and 2021. It's been oscillating between 10,000 to 15,000, give or take, which is pretty small. The University of Baeza, which doesn't exist anymore, lasted for about 300 years from the 16th century until the roughly middle point, end of the 19th century. It was actually a very important university in the south of Spain, and at least during those 300 years, a key center for the development of the country. Started being a basic humanities type of center, and then it developed towards the end of the 16th century, studies in rhetoric, grammatic, Greek, traditional Greco-Roman studies, philosophy, theology, and things like that. It would actually be, like I said, a very important center. Eventually, once it got demoted, it will still be functioning as an educational institution. Actually, in fact, the area that we're walking past right now is actually one of the visitable areas inside, although it was closed at this moment of the day, which is known as El Aula de Antonio Machado, because Antonio Machado, who was actually a teacher for a really long time, actually imparted classes in here, because since the late, let's say, late 19th, early 20th century, even though demoted, it was still part of the secondary education, let's say, development of Spain. And Antonio Machado, like I said, will be here imparting different type of courses, normally aimed to what we call now bachiller, preparation for university, that kind of stuff. Nowadays, actually, Baeza is home to the International University of Andalucia, and it's reutilize some of the old buildings for that purpose. Well, we're coming into this area of Plaza de la Santa Cruz with the Iglesia de la Santa Cruz, the Church of the Holy Cross, which is a very small but very interesting church in Baeza, because it's what we call very late Romanesque. This actually was built at the beginning of the tail end of the 13th, early 14th century, which is really unusual, particularly in the area of Andalucia, and one of the reasons why it's a UNESCO heritage in that regard. It is home nowadays to two relatively important cofradías in Baeza. The cofradías are these kind of religious guilds, or hermandades de penitencia, as we call them sometimes in Spain, which have a lot of big roles to display in local festivities, and particularly the closer that we get to the celebrations of Easter. These are la Venerable Cofradía de la Santa Vera y Cruz, and the other one is la Ilustre y Venerable Cofradía del Santísimo Cristo del Calvario y Nuestra Señora de la Amargura, because all of these cofrades have very, very long names. In any case, this is a very beautiful tradition, by the way, and if you ever have the chance to go to Spain during Easter, Baeza is a very beautiful place where to experience this celebration, and perhaps a bit more low-key, and yet equally, incredible display than Sevilla and whatnot. And in front of the church, and as I take you through the alley, through the back of the church, so you can see that, and then back again to the front, we have what we call Palacio de, not del, Jabalquinto. This is perhaps one of the most iconic buildings in Baeza. I'm sure you can tell because of its architecture that it is absolutely incredible, and it is one of the key symbols of the Marquesado de Jabalquinto, a marquis that actually had a lot of power in this local area, and that nowadays is that seat for the International University of Andalucia that I was mentioning earlier, called actually Sede Antonio Machado. Well, this is a building that was built once again in the late Middle Ages, in the 15th century, by the Señor de Jabalquinto. This is a lordly title, and you will not be surprised to hear what is the actual name of the Lord of Jabalquinto, Juan Alfonso de Benavides, of course, Manrique, the very famous captain of Lorca, because he was an important military title, and he was a cousin, actually, of the future Fernando de España, one of the Catholic monarchs, the husband of Isabel. Well, In any case, this house is going to become a very important lordly palace, or what we would call, an urban manor home, so to speak, that will be pretty much in use up until the 19th century, when it will go into a different let's say, use. That is where it will be utilized for a little bit as a seminary for, people who are studying to get into the religious profession, and then eventually it will be, changing roles back and forth until, it was given this new role as the seat of education for the Antonio Machado section of the University of Andalucia. Again, the architecture is incredibly iconic. El plateresco that you see here is even better than the one that we saw at the actual town hall. In fact, this style of plateresco, we call it estilo Reyes Católicos because it's the inception point of plateresco during the time of the Catholic monarchs, particularly under the patronage of Isabel. It has maybe a bit more Gothic than the other one that we saw, and it uses a lot of iconography from heraldic elements, high nobility, and what have you not. Now, as we walk us up the hill, we are finding a couple more important monuments. We have La Fuente de Santa María, which we will get to the fountain in just a second, Las Casas Consistoriales Altas, which I'll explain in a moment what they are, and finally the cathedral. So I'll explain the whole complex together, which is pretty much the tail end of this tour. So La Casa Consistorial is normally the Spanish word for the town hall. In this case, these are the old town hall. They were the, let's say, building for the local city council between the tail end of the 15th century all the way up to the beginning of the 19th century. They were still inside of the fortified city in that regard, and as you can see, right next to the cathedral, sort of to promote the idea of where the power of the city truly resided, with the Benavides, with the town hall, and of course with the cathedral, which in reality is to say with the Benavides and the cathedral, but one of those things. So. The entire point is that this original town hall was also under the supervision of that let's say civil servant that I've mentioned earlier, el corregidor, okay, and it ran what we call el Concejo Municipal. And el Concejo Municipal is sort of similar, although not exactly the same, than to the, let's say, current institutions that we have of mayors of towns and cities and their, let's say, council or ministers, okay? The architecture that we see here, by the way, is mostly Gothic in that regards. Urban Gothic, so to speak. And by the way, I don't know if you've noticed all across the city, and particularly over these buildings, that there is a lot of red paint, red graffiti. This is actually something that we're going to see in Úbeda as well when I take you there, and it was something that was done actually by the students. Literally, it is actual graffiti. You're not making it up. It is historical graffiti that has actually been preserved, for the sake of the importance that it has, and to attest to an institution that no longer exists. Then we have La Fuente de Santa María, the Fountain of Santa María, which was actually sponsored by this council that we were just talking about in the 16th century. Public fountain, by the way, is still in use, or could be in use if we wanted it to. And it's considered one of the key monuments of the city because of the state of conservation that it's in, which I'm sure you realize is really wonderful, despite some very minor alterations done in the 17th century. The most recent restoration took place, I think it was in the 90s, but it's been genuinely very, very minimal in that regard. And just out of curiosity, the water that actually comes here comes from a mine, La Mina de Celadilla, which is like a 2 or 3 kilometers, probably halfway through, between 2 to 3 kilometers northeast, if I remember correctly, of the city. So again, as you can see, that the public fountains and the way that the city of Baeza has been making use of its, let's say, local surroundings is very important for the locals and for that UNESCO heritage. And as a result, this kind of became the modelic, so to speak, public fountain for many in the area. And then here we have La Catedral de la Natividad de Nuestra Señora. This is the Cathedral of the Nativity of the Virgin, which, is not a very common thing to celebrate in this day and age, but in the Middle Ages was actually quite important still. It is a very iconic building in Baeza, not just because of the location where it is right at the top of it. This would have been one of the most dominating buildings in the landscape, alongside with the Alcázar that no longer exists. But that tower, which is incredible, and you can see it for miles and miles on end, it's about 50 meters high. It provides, by the way, a wonderful view of the valley of the Guadalquivir, which is the river that comes through here, and it's been declared national monument on top of its UNESCO heritage since 1931. We actually reckon that the cathedral was built on top of an old Roman temple, which afterwards had been transformed into a Visigothic place of cult, and after that was even, believe it or not, an actual mosque. Most likely the very mosque that was actually used by the famous Al-Bayazid that I was mentioning earlier. But by 1227, it will actually change over to be a Christian church, because this is the year when, if you recall, a lot of those Muslim populations of the area of Jaen ran away because of the death, assassination, whatever, of Al-Bayazid, and the king Fernando III, El Santo, pushes more and more people to actually come here from the Christian kingdoms of Spain and lead to the repopulation of the area of Al-Andalus. Despite how old the building technically is, it's mostly a Renaissance architecture, because in the 16th century half of the building actually came crashing down, so they had to fix it. And the same guy that did the Franciscanos chapel did this as well. And this pretty much concludes our tour of Baeza. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope it's given you perspective of an area that, like I said, doesn't normally get a lot of recognition. And remember that you can keep on supporting us through the pages of PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee, so that we can keep on bringing you wonderful tours like this. Thank you so much, and see you soon. Bye.